Hello and welcome to the Love of the Star podcast on February 20th, 2026. Here we go, presented by the On Time Experts, the official AC heating and plumbing partner of Love of the Star, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Dallas Stars, making this show possible. I'm Eric Chiafalo alongside the Super Bowl champion Bryan Broaddus on the heels of the Christian Parker intro presser. Plenty to unpack from that, and of course, a little draft conversation, free agency, whatever we get into, but brought us live from the Crown Global Media Studios. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thank you very much. Yeah, a lot to get into, a lot to unpack. Got the combine starting up. We'll be on the ground there starting next Tuesday. So looking forward to that week in Indianapolis, learning all we can, stalking the Jerry bus, and seeing who gets on and off. There'll be some serious tampering going on while we're there in Indianapolis. So a lot of news probably rolling out of the where the center, where everybody the who's who of the National Football League will be there in one spot. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a big week here on the podcast next week with Broaddus boots on the ground out in Indy, gathering all the intel and info, not only on the draft prospects, but also when it comes to the Cowboys' plans, what they're saying, what they're thinking, and where this thing is headed. So going to be a lot of fun next week. I know, Broaddus, this is like your favorite trip over all the trips you could possibly go on from a football standpoint. You did it for 20 plus, 30 plus years, and now you're back in Indy, and I know you got the butterflies, the football butterflies. You're fired up.
Yeah, there's a couple of cities that you could drop me into, and I could get around absolutely no problem. Indianapolis being one of those. I've got that downtown pretty well navigated from I do a pretty good job of staying out of the cold. When you're walking around downtown, you can make the mistake of getting caught outside in 20-degree weather. Well, I figured out how you can walk from hotel to hotel across the street to convention center and then make the navigation through the convention center. So you never, ever have to go outside. So, you're right. I mean, 25 years of doing that, of being a part of that. If you had to, the experiences I have, the combine, the Senior Bowl, and then what we've been able to do going to Radio Row for the Super Bowl has been incredible. But if you give me an opportunity to go to the combine, I can learn a lot, and I'm always very excited to make that trip.
So getting to Christian Parker and the intro presser, it was just him and Shoddy. And that threw people off a little bit. They're like, wait, where are the Jones boys? I do think it comes down to very simply, like with everything, so many questions about the offseason that people want to get answered. I like the star of the show is supposed to be Christian Parker, and everything should be directed in that manner. And if Jerry and or Steven were sitting there, you would have had media members that were firing off questions about Pickens and Javonte Williams and free agency and draft and all these different things. And I think they probably want to save that for, like we just talked about, next week in Indy, where they'll sit there and hold court with the media, and they'll be able to flesh out all that kind of stuff. And so it's just Shoddy and Christian Parker. You could tell Shoddy's fired up. He always is, but Christian Parker's clearly his guy. I thought that was a nice little symbolism as well of, okay, you had the Eberflus stuff, felt more like a Jones situation. Now you have Christian Parker. I'm sitting here next to him because this is my guy. I'm hitching my wagon to him, and we're going here together. If Christian Parker succeeds, yay, Shoddy. If Christian Parker fails in a lot of ways, damn, Shoddy, you dropped the ball here. But in regards to the process, they had like 40-plus interviews. Were you surprised to hear that the Joneses were sitting in on those interviews?
I would say that they were sitting in the interviews, and I need to get this confirmed. I don't know if Jerry and Steven are going to sit in on 40 interviews on the Zooms. I can get that confirmed. I need to get that confirmed. My gut feeling was that Jerry and Steven were sitting in on the in-person interviews is kind of where I want to believe that that was taking place. Did Shoddy say that the Joneses were there every step of the way? Because I did not hear that per se, but I absolutely want to believe, and I think that part of it is true, that they, in the in-person interviews, they were a big part of those.
Yeah, he didn't specify like the Zoom and everything else. So
yeah, I would say once and I could get this confirmed, but I would say that I'd be willing to bet that once candidates were brought to the Star, that's where I think Jerry and Steven got involved.
Okay. Well, either way, I did find it interesting. Hey, they're going to sit up in there, and respect to that, And Shotty does a nice job, kind of pulling them in. Hey, he clearly spearheaded this whole deal. All those names. I mean, these are names that are coming from college. Like the way this staff is built, these aren't just household. Oh, for sure, the Joneses know these football names because it's Rex Ryan and Marvin Lewis or something. These are guys that, I mean, Shotty scoured the football landscape, as did Christian Parker. Once Parker got in the chair, and then he went to go build out that staff. It's a very interesting staff, and that was one of the things that Shotty talked about as well. And I know that you've harped on, Broadus, is, man, in the perfect world here, Christian Parker's going to knock this out of the park, and within what, 2 years? 3
Probably,
years?
maybe depending on how fast he turns this thing around. I mean, he all of a sudden Dallas turns into a playoff team. They're a top 12 defense, maybe top 8 defense. Christian Parker's going to start getting noticed. They're going to connect all the things that the Cowboys connected. He's been with Vic Fangio. He's done this. He's done that. He's a young guy. He communicates well. The team looks like they're playing well. The guys play hard for him. They don't look out of place. They're well coached. All these things are going to start to come to the forefront, and that's what people are looking for. They're looking for guys with ideas. They're looking for guys with energy. They're looking for guys with a plan. They're looking for guys, especially if Christian Parker comes in here and all of a sudden they hit big at 12 and they hit big at 20, and then they go out and identify some free agents, and Christian Parker has a hand in that. Well, then throw that in there. Not only a coach, teacher, evaluator. Yeah, the hope is that Christian Parker does his job so well that he stays and all that. But the bigger hope is if Christian Parker leaves, that there's somebody that they hired that could be that next guy. We see it with the Rams all the time. The 49ers. We see guys leave those organizations, and it seems like the following year they're back out to looking at young coaches on those staffs, and that's your hope if you're the Cowboys. You're hoping that Christian Parker's the guy, but you're hoping that one of these other coaches could step up if in fact Christian Parker gets that opportunity as a head coach.
Yeah, inevitably, if he does what we hope he's going to do, then it won't be terribly long before he's getting head coach interviews and perhaps a head coach opportunity. And that was something that you had talked about in lead up to this. Like, I hope they're building out a staff where they can have guys that can fill the role. And that was something that Shotty talked about. They're already thinking about that, like being able to sort of promote from within, and they have now a staff filled with young coaches. I mean, just we'll see how it plays out. But like right now, it seems like I would guess the SMU defensive coordinator who's coaching the inside linebacker, Scott Simons. I would think, because that's a guy who's run defenses before, did it at SMU. And he ran some really, really good defenses. And some people around are talking about him being like one of the more creative defensive minds in college football. And it was only a matter of time before he got a head coaching job in college football. But clearly the allure of the NFL brought him here. So I think he would maybe be first in line there, but they'll have their choice of a bunch of young guys if they get this defense rolling. So I thought that was interesting, because I know that's something that you've talked about plenty over the last few weeks. And Shotty came right out and said, like, hey, our plan is to win big, and then our staff's going to get picked apart, and we want to be able to promote from within and just kind of keep the same sort of principles defensively, and not have to do the thing that they've done here as of late, where they're changing schemes every year for dang near a half decade. So I thought that stood out to me as well. And then just Christian Parker in general, his demeanor, his confidence with the way that he was saying everything, like getting right to the point. He had his answers. He was very comfortable with just coming out and saying, hey, 3-4 in base, but we're going to be super multiple. We want to be able to disguise coverages and things like that. And despite being a guy who is coming from the secondary, he said, and respect, I get it and I love it, it's all about the trenches. Like, it starts up front. He's going to be magnetized to that secondary group for sure, and that is clearly his main expertise. But when it comes to building out this defense, he's like, it starts with your front. You just saw it in Seattle. What did they do in the offseason? They bring in DeMarcus Lawrence. They had like 9 guys on that defensive line that were rotating in and out, and they were able to get pressure, stop the run that way. And that's going to be the focal point here. And I appreciated him saying that.
Yeah, and listen, let's be honest though too about this. And I'm not saying this as a slam to you, what your statement just was. Every time we see a new coach, it's, well, we're going to be multiple, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. You know, there's going to have to be some proof here. There's going to have to be some proof that, and listen, again, I sound like I'm slamming you right now,
No.
But Matt Eberflus came in and says, we're going to be multiple and we're going to do, you know, and it's just every coach, when they start a press conference, we're going to be multiple. We're going to be attacking. We're going to be sound. We're going to be, you hear the coach speak and you're like going, okay, I heard this before, but let's see it. The things that are going to interest me is, how much of that 3-4 front are we going to see? How much are we going to see? There's a lot of really smart people in the media. You know, when you look at things and break it all down, the John Ownings of the world and people like that who are talking about. Listen, when you hear him talk about 4-3 spacing, he's talking about man and a half gap defense is what he's talking about. You know, usually in 3-4 we talk about playing head up, playing inside gap, playing outside gap. Well, you know, in a man and a half gap scheme with a 3-4 front with 4-3 principles, it's you shade to one side, you're responsible for that gap, but then have the ability to fall back to the other gap. And then linebackers tend to play not so much downhill. They fit the gaps, and that's how they kind of they take care of things in the run defense. But his philosophy, you know, we could study the Vic Fangio stuff where he cut his teeth, and we can learn. You could think about, you know, Philadelphia has got personnel. You know, you go back and watch Philadelphia play. Watch how they play their front. You know what they do. They it's not in the old scheme. It was line up in the gap, attack the gap. That was your only responsibility. But in this way he's talking about, you know, with the 4-3 and how he's going to play it with the spacing where I'm talking about gap and then half gap over. You know, you're responsible for that guy and that gap. And so we'll see. The key to this is going to be Jerry, Steven, Will McClay being very aggressive and coming out and getting personnel. I think there's guys that he has. I think he's going to lean on Osa. I think he's going to lean on Quinnen Williams. I think he's going to lean on Kenny Clark. And, you know, we'll see what happens with Clowney and others, and you know, Donovan Ezraku, he's in the mix. But they're going to need more personnel. And the fact of the matter, I think, you know, and Vach Lombardi, who I work with here at Crown Global Media on the Doing All Right, he and I had the discussion. Vach asked me this question about 2 weeks ago. Are the Cowboys leaning more towards getting a nickel corner, or are they leaning towards getting nickel safety? And that seems to be where people are playing with nowadays. It's more that guy, the hybrid safety player. And the way that I kind of interpret it, listening to Christian Parker talk, was they might be looking more for the nickel safety than they are looking for. You know, that's something that, you know, can a guy come in here? Can they play with two safeties? Can they play with that hybrid safety linebacker, guy that can play around the line of scrimmage, guy that can occasionally blitz, guy that can play in coverage? You know, there's several of those players in the draft this year. I mean, there's a There's a good number of those guys. Caleb Downs being the number one guy in that whole thing. But if you're looking for a guy, the nickel safety, so when you start to talk about the 20th overall pick, it might not necessarily be for a corner. Now we'll see what they do at 12. It might, if they don't move out of that pick, that might be where they grab their corner. But man, it sounds like to me that safety is clearly going to be in play for this football team. And we'll see if they address it in free agency, or we'll see if they address it with the draft pick. A lot of people have kind of connected dots with the Reed Blankenship, who was in Philadelphia. Coaches come in and they have a big say in, like, if you bring this guy in, this is what he could do. This is how he can help us. The pro guys at the Cowboys are very familiar with Reed Blankenship. They evaluate him twice a year. So they know the type of player they're potentially going to get. So, there's going to be a lot of work ahead. But when a coach comes in and says, oh, we're going to be multiple, and we're going to do this and that, yeah, I get it, coach. Okay, now go get players and prove to me that you're going to be what you say you're going to be.
All right, let's unpack a little bit more of that. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast, presented by the On Time Experts, the official AC heating and plumbing partner of Love of the Star, also the Dallas Cowboys and the Dallas Stars. And you can call on the On Time Experts and they will come to your home the same day, backed by their Stay Warm guarantee all winter long. You can visit the ontimeexperts.com, click the Book Now button, and you will pay less over time because they correctly diagnose your issue and they fix it right the first time. All we ask you to do is just support the people that support this show here on the Love of the Star podcast, and the On Time Experts do just that. Same day or you don't pay policy for certain repairs, 100% satisfaction guaranteed, no excuses, no exceptions. We love the On Time Experts, and you will too, for any AC heating or plumbing needs that you have. Yeah, and I think that's a huge one there when you talk about that nickel corner spot and that hybrid safety kind of piece. And this is the quote that he had in terms of the importance of that role in his defense. This is Christian Parker at his intro presser. He says that role is very important. That guy, he's a corner sometimes. He's a safety sometimes. He's a backer sometimes. He's a defensive end when he's blitzing. You want to have a guy who has natural instincts and ability to feel the game and play football. He's usually a guy who, if you were playing football on a Saturday afternoon in the neighborhood, he's your first round draft pick just because he feels the game naturally. That's definitely an important guy to a good defense. So you're seeing it all across the league. In Philadelphia, that was the Cooper DeJean role. And he's a unique guy because he could play boundary corner. He could play the slot corner. He could be the safety. He's big enough at like 200 pounds, 205 pounds. I think he's like 6'2", super athletic. So they come in a little bit of different shapes and sizes, but I think that 200-pound line is probably pretty important there. And if you can get a longer guy, a guy who's temperamentally willing to get physical, play in the run game, being able to blitz, like you said, like you have to be kind of a jack of all trades kind of player. Eminwari with the Seahawks, you just saw how important that was for them. Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, Petrie with Houston. It's a bit of a unicorn player. These guys aren't just growing on trees here. And so you might have to sacrifice one element of what you would want in a perfect world just to get a guy who can get in there and do it. So maybe you get a guy who maybe doesn't have the size you want, but he's good in coverage. He blitzes, he tackles well, and he can do some of that stuff. But ideally, I think you do want a bigger guy, because the point of it is because you want that to be, you still have your two safeties, and then you have this guy who's acting like a hybrid nickel player, and you just want to be able to be like, hey, that's our base defense. So if you come out in 11 personnel, we can still do it because that guy can cover. If you come out in a heavier personnel like the Rams like to do, Eminwari's not coming off the field. So it doesn't matter. Rams, whatever you want to do. If you want to go 11 personnel, we got you. If you want to go in your 12 or 13 personnel, we don't change, because we feel comfortable that we can stop the run this way and then also be able to do the requisite things in coverage as well. So very, very important. You mentioned that there's some guys here in this draft. Fortunately, it's a really good safety class. And not every safety qualifies for this exact role. But when you're thinking about this particular role in the Cowboys defense, who are the players that are coming to mind for you when you talk about maybe pick 20?
Well, pick 20, yeah. I mean, of course, I mentioned Downs from Ohio State would be the number one guy. That everything that you're talking about, it just seems like he's going to end up with the Giants at 5. It does not appear that he's going to get past any of that. Thieneman from Oregon fits that role. Wheatley from Penn State fits that role. To the point, McNeil, Warren from Toledo fits that role. I think you could even talk about Scott from Miami as a possibility of fitting that role. Bud Clark from TCU would be in the mix there for you. Ramsey from USC. I think Halsey's a little bit of a bigger guy. I wouldn't put him in a whole lot of coverage. But I just named 6 guys right there that kind of can fit that role of playing down, playing back, playing with range. I mean, I was watching Bud Clark from TCU play yesterday, and there's a guy that could stand on the hash or stand in the middle of the field, pedal, turn, and play and break and play deep ball, or can run forward and play the screen, or can run forward and fill on the run, or play around the line of scrimmage and come on the blitz. I've seen him do that. So there are guys in this draft. And listen, I kind of feel like that everybody's got a linebacker earmarked for Dallas at 20. I would not be shocked if they took one of these safeties. I do not feel like, listen, if you ask me to do a mock draft right now, I might give Dallas a corner or linebacker at 12, depending on who's there. If you look at some of the mock drafts, I know The Athletic had the mock draft. I think Zach Wolchuk went over the mock draft on our show yesterday for me at Krusty's Corner, and went through it. And you got pretty wiped out with some of your guys. And so it came down to, okay, well, we have to think about things here. What are we going to address the linebacker first? I think the best linebacker that everybody's been mocking to the Cowboys at 12 has been Sonny Styles. Well, Sonny Styles goes before. Okay, now where are you at? Are you with one of these corners? But I wouldn't be shocked. Linebacker, corner with that 12, and then safety with the 20. It just would not surprise me one bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think from the importance factor of the role, like you can't just dip. So you can't just throw anybody out there. So when Christian Parker talks about that being the most important role in the defense, like, okay, you gotta put a serious asset here. And fortunately, we're in a draft where it actually provides some of that, as you just sort of laid out for us. And in free agency, there are plenty of linebackers. Like, we'll have a much clearer picture from a draft standpoint once we get through free agency. But there's a handful of linebackers in free agency that you can go get, and you can plug them in, and bang, you kind of got that role covered, at least in the short term, if you go with one of the more veteran players. But there's some young in their prime kind of guys there as well that could lock down that spot for the next few years for sure. And that's a little bit easier of a position to find as opposed to this one, which is super unique. I don't know that you're finding somebody in free agency that you feel super comfortable in this particular role here. So if you can draft a guy out of college and mold him the way you want to from the jump of his career, that seems to be like a no-brainer. So I'm with you at 20. I'm looking at Thieneman. I'm looking at McNeil Warren. And when you said McNeil Warren's name, you said like to a point, like he could fit that role to a point. What does that mean? Because from a size standpoint, and I've only seen him briefly, you've studied him inside and out, so you'll give us better knowledge here. But from what I've seen of him in the brief look, man, this guy looks like he fits the bill beautifully. Size, athleticism, willingness to tackle, driving down in the alley, playing deep.
Cover. I don't know how much you want to walk him into the slot and play guys. I think Wheatley from Penn State's a better player doing that. And maybe even Thieneman some too at Oregon. There might be, how much do you want to really, really play him in coverage? That's going to be the factor, because these guys do walk over and play in the slot. Some of these guys, it's cool. Yeah, hey, bigger wide receivers, tight ends, cool. But when you start to play slot players, we've seen guys with the quickness, the quick twitch guys, stuff like that, the explosive players off the line. How much do you want to put those guys in coverage situations? I am a fan of McNeil Warren. Don't get me wrong. I love the fact the length that he has and the way that he's able to turn. You can see that, for a really tall guy, you would think he's really leggy. And I mean leggy that it takes him a little bit to turn, but he's really not that way. I do think that, how much coverage situation what we need to do is as we get further along, and you'll see some of this, maybe if he works out at the combine, you'll see his ability to move and to turn and to break and to, that those are the things that you're going to have to kind of, get an idea, the gauntlet drill with the hands and stuff like that. I like Wheatley a little bit better when it comes to the coverage aspect over McNeil Warren. But I don't think you had McNeil Warren wrong. I just would say that maybe Wheatley does the things that McNeil Warren does, but does it on a little bit better level as a cover guy.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, and that goes back to the challenge of being this, like to be a big body guy, but also to be able to at times play like a more traditional nickel. Hey, you're lined up against a quick slot corner, and now you got to be able to play him in coverage. Like it is a tough thing to identify here. I do think it's interesting that he went to Toledo, and you have the Quinyon Mitchell Toledo connection with Christian Parker in Philadelphia.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think for him it would scare him. But are the Cowboys are the Cowboys talking about wanting the bigger program kind of players?
Will McClay has always kind of been that guy. That's not to say they haven't, but if you sat down and had a beer with Will, I think he would always tell you that the guys that are playing, on a weekly basis, playing in the Southeastern Conference or the Big Ten, those are the guys that he kind of gravitates towards. I think stuff with the ACC as well. But listen, the way the transfer portal works now, there are guys that started off playing, in the MAC and end up playing it, in the Big Ten. And, so, we've seen this happen, or vice versa. Maybe a guy started off in the Southeastern Conference and he's playing in the Sun Belt. I mean, you just don't know. So, I mean, not that you don't know, but it's just the way the transfer portal works. Big school guy, small school guy. Small school guy might have started off in a big school and had to transfer, So those are the things that you just kind of, you look at the level of comp. Listen, we got a great idea about Bain, Messidor, those guys at Miami and how they played. Those guys played 16, 17 games this year. Guys at Indiana the same way, whether it's Mendoza, the quarterback, Pons, the corner, those guys played a lot of football at a very, very high level this year. So you're going to tend to kind of look at those guys that have done that throughout their career.
Pons is another guy that, I mean, he doesn't check the size box for you in that nickel role, but everything else, I mean, tenacious, can cover,
there's another
tackle.
guy. There's a guy at Rivers, also at Duke, that's a very similar height and weight as Pons. So there's some guys that are smaller, which really don't always fit the scout's eye. Especially a guy my age who's done this for a long, long time. We tend not to go towards that smaller guys, but smaller guys are making plays. You look at there's a linebacker. When Dallas gets into day 3, York from Texas A&M, 5'11", 227 pounds, but man, a thumper, a guy that attacks, downhill player. Maybe he doesn't fit now into what Christian Parker, if they're playing this 4-3 spacing, 3-4 front with gaps and could, being more patient with how they fit, not playing so much downhill. But there's some smaller, shorter guys in this draft that are really, really good players.
Yeah, for sure. All right. We got more to get into. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast, Love of the Stars and Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast, presented by the On Time Experts. You can visit theontimeexperts.com, click the book now button, and they are locally trusted with years of experience serving the community. I've seen it firsthand. They are absolutely fantastic. Transparent pricing, no surprise add-ons or hidden fees. They have friendly background check technicians you will feel comfortable having in your home. 100% satisfaction guarantee, no excuses, no exceptions, same day or you don't pay policy for certain repairs, and you'll pay less over time because they correctly diagnose your issue and they fix it right the first time. So go ahead and visit the ontimeexperts.com, click the book now button for all your AC heating and plumbing needs, and we appreciate them very much here on Love of the Star, as we appreciate you. Now, looking at some of the current personnel, Marquise Bell's name's been thrown around quite a bit, and I think like just at a glance, you look at Marquise Bell and you talk about this nickel spot, and you're like, yeah, that's a guy that would fit the bill. Like, he's got the size, he's played safety, he's played linebacker, but I just feel like his play has dipped so dramatically since 2023, and it looks like a different player out there. Like, I don't even know that how much of a actually like a functional player he is. And maybe you chalk it up to the Eberflus stuff and just like everybody just looked worse in that scheme, and maybe Christian Parker can do something with him. And I do think from an in-house standpoint, Bell, Bland, those are probably the two guys that you think could maybe get some work at that particular position. But I heard Nick Eatman at DallasCowboys.com drop his name. I think they dropped his name during the presser as well. And I'm just like, man, he can't be the plan, right? Like, he could be a part of the group of guys that throughout the spring and the summer, you're kind of kicking the tires on to see how they fit, and could be some level of depth here. But you agree, like, Marquise Bell can't be the answer at that position.
No, he can't, and he can't. And listen, but if you would have told me 2 years ago when he was playing, 3 years ago, playing for Dan Quinn, playing in that linebacker role, that big dime package that they were playing with, I would have fought you to say that Bell was a better cover man than Wilson. And I'm sure people right now are listening going, well, Dan Broadus, that ain't so hard to see, because we've seen Donovan Wilson not play well at single high. We've seen him not play well off the hash. Donovan Wilson's kind of the down player that, can make occasional plays. And I would have believed that Bell could have been a cover guy, but but he was terrible in the Matt Eberflus scheme. And I don't know if it just bad placement, bad timing, poor coaching. I'm sure there's a lot of factors. We'll see. But if you're telling me that Bell is going to be the answer going forward and keep you from maybe looking at free agency or looking at the draft at some point in time for one of these guys, then you've really got some misevaluation problems. I think Bell's a good player, but I think, man, he did not look. He looked like a completely different player here the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, just the eye test. Anybody watching the Cowboys knows. And unfortunately, you could say that about most of the guys on the defense from this past year, where it's just like, what are we doing? But even when you look at like the Pro Football Focus grades, like, he's right there, like 88th out of 91 safeties in a lot of categories. So I like Marquise Bell. I really liked him a few years ago, as you mentioned, like when he was young and there was just kind of some hope here, like we might have something with this guy, but the play has fallen off. So maybe Christian Parker can revitalize that dude, and you can have a guy in-house that can do some of those roles that we're talking about here. But they dropped his name a few times, and I'm going, oh, man, he can't be the plan here. He cannot be the plan. I'm still with you. I like the idea of taking one of these guys at pick 20 and just securing that role, because it's a very difficult role to find, and this draft does have some guys. Now, Christian Parker was talking about Savone Rebel, and he studied him last year, of course, in Philadelphia with Rebel coming out of the draft. And I thought he broke him down, like from a scouting report standpoint. Like, I feel like he's got a pretty good grasp on what Rebel is.
Yeah, this is my hope. And listen, everybody that's listened to our program, listen to 105.3 The Fan, listen to me on Crown Global Media, you know that I love Rebel as a player. I did at East Carolina. I honestly hurt for the kid when he was rehabbing and then got hurt again in training camp, to where he got a setback and then he was having to kind of basically start all over again. He got thrown into a situation where they're playing 3 games in 12 days. He started that run, had some moments where he was really good, and then in the moments, dealing with the brace, dealing with confidence, dealing with a lot of things. I just want to see the kid have an off season where he could go out and he could not have to worry about rehabbing. Work on strengthening his knee, work on strengthening his craft, his technique, his footwork, his balance, his body control, all these things that we saw pre-injury of him. This kid could play football. I just thought he was put in a very, very tough situation, and things started to snowball on him. If he turns out to be a bust, I'll admit it. I really thought, though, watching him play with his length, his ability to move, all these things, I was super positive that he was going to rehab and be back. The guy plays with a lot of confidence. It's just his confidence got shook a little bit in some of the stuff that he was having to deal with, and it snowballed on him. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that a different scheme for him, different coaches might be something that he need. But if he turns out not to be the player, I'll be the first one to admit I was wrong about the guy.
So as you look ahead with the combine for next week, Broadus, do you have a player or two that you are most interested in getting some questions answered? Like Javon McCoy comes to mind, because he's the Tennessee corner that a lot of people feel like the Cowboys will be in position to take. He was absolutely dominant in 2024, but he had the ACL, missed all of last season. And so that's like a big health question. Can we get some answers on him? Is there a couple of guys that you're thinking about here?
Yeah, this is going to be very, very important for him. When you look overall, with McCoy, there's belief that if Tennessee would have gotten into the college football playoff, that he might have been able to play. And so they kept asking questions about him late in the season, and then, of course, Tennessee got eliminated from contention, and then he completely shut it down at that point in time. The questions are going to be, everybody's going to have the opportunity to look at the knee. They're going to have an opportunity to kind of test it, to pull on it, to twist it a little bit, to see what they got. I don't particularly know if he's going to, and we'll find out when we get there, if he is going to work out, for everybody. I'd like to believe. I've seen him in some videos with strength coaches, with speed coaches, so we're going to get a workout from him. I don't know if it's going to be at the combine. I hope it's at the combine. If not, we're going to get him in Knoxville, Tennessee on a workout. So that should make people feel a lot better. You're going to get the results on how good the knee, how stable the knee is here in the 1st of March, and then go from there. And I think that'll answer a lot of questions for folks. This is not like Rebel that if you draft him, you're gonna, you're not gonna be able to use him until, that kind of thing. There's a lot of these receivers that you have a little bit questions about their speed. I know one of the cornerbacks, I have a question about his speed. Chris Johnson from San Diego State. I know Zach Wolchuk has got him in the 1st round. Guy's got 1st round ability. I don't think Zach's wrong there. I just worry this is a 4.55 guy playing corner, And I had some of the same issues last year with Will Johnson, who was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals. They were talking about him being very highly selected. He was selected in the 2nd round, but never ran a 40-yard dash for anybody or anything like that. So, it's you're always hopeful that you could go in and get an idea about guys' speed. If they run for you, that's great. If they post a time, great. If not, well, then we're going to have to carry, like I say, Chris Johnson. If he doesn't run at the combine, we're going to all have to go out to San Diego. Not a bad school call. Done that before for Oz Hakeem at San Diego State, and go work him out and see if we could get a 40-yard dash time. But there's some receivers too, as I mentioned, that have some questions about really how well do they run, and hopefully we'll get some answers on that by the end of the combine.
The other corner that is, that's been mocked to the Cowboys at 12, LSU's Mansour Delane. Do you have any questions about his athleticism or anything like that? Is there any, I hear he's such a cerebral player and people like him from that standpoint. But I've heard some questions about maybe just how athletic is he? Not that it's a huge concern, but as you mentioned, at the cornerback spot, athleticism is really of the utmost importance.
I'll say this though about him, and he is from my alma mater, so I watched him every single week. And one of the lines in my notes was, "There's not an assignment that he can't handle."
Right?
It doesn't. You could put Alabama can run Bernard out there, at wide receiver, and Delane is going to go with him, and that's not going to be a problem. It really, really doesn't matter to him. I mean, his ability, his footwork, his pedal, those things keep him in position. He's so smooth moving. If there's questions about his athletic ability, man, I would kind of push back on that one. But the guy's got quickness. He's got balance. He's just as good going back as he is forward. I mean, he's not grabby. Sometimes you get these corners that get a little grabby in the way they play. This guy, he just defends. He just has a feel for how to stay in phase. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be one bit surprised if he's the first corner taken off the board.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Giants have been mocked corners, and when they've been mocked a corner, it's been Delane has been the guy. It's they've been mocked wide receivers, they've been mocked safety, they've been mocked corner. Delane always seems to be the guy, and I think that maybe some people, the fact that Delane played this year is a lot different than McCoy, and I think maybe that's why some people. I know Zach Wolchuk. When we talk about it, he and Aish and I on the stack, this is his guy. Delane, he's got Delane over McCoy on his board. And I just watched this guy make a game-saving play against Clemson. I watched South Carolina game, a fourth down. They tried to throw the ball on the outside. He perfect position, played around the receiver, offhand, knocked the ball down. LSU's ball game. This kid makes a lot of plays. So he's kind of one of those attack at your own risk. He is everything that you wish that Mo Claiborne was when they made that trade and that selection many years ago. Mo Claiborne is not even close to how good of a football player Mansour Delane is for LSU.
I love it. All right, that'll do it for today's episode of the Love of the Star podcast presented by the On Time Experts. Thank you to the Super Bowl champion, Bryan Broaddus. And we'll be wall-to-wall all next week with Broaddus live at the Combine. All your Combine and Cowboys coverage right here on Love of the Star. Until then, hands and hug pounds, everyone.